Hello and welcome to the Metapod Podcast, the Pokemon TCG podcast that revolves around the evolving meta. Back to two hosts here on this show. Sean, how are you doing?
I'm good. I'm tired, but I'm good.
Yeah, you ran a 12,000-hour League Cup yesterday, it
I think it
seems
was
like.
8 hours actually, but it's still it was long. The place we were hosting the cup, it's a restaurant, and they were closing at 8:30, and the cup finished at 8:15. The
Oh
final round.
boy.
We were like debating like, do we need to move this back to like the Cricket Wireless or whatever? And in which case I wouldn't have been able to stream it, but luckily it it all worked out just right. But
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I had work going on, um, because it was the weekend and stuff, and I
mhm.
was just at home working. And you started the League Cup, and then I feel like when I finished work, I looked over, and by finished work, I mean finished the live game. I still had stuff to do, but I finished the live game and you were still live, and I was like, wait a minute, how long do League Cups last? Has it been that long since I've been to one?
Honestly, yeah, League Cups last anywhere between 6 and 8 hours usually, if you go all the way to the finals, right? Like, obviously, if you don't make
Yeah.
top cut, you're looking at 4 to 5 hours maybe. But there was a lot of people. I think we had around 60 people at this League Cup,
Yeah, I was
which
gonna
is
say it seemed
huge.
like a decent sized one.
Yeah, that's a lot of people. So we had 6 rounds of Swiss, and then obviously 3 rounds of top cut. So but yeah, we'll get into that at the end of the pod. Well, I have some thoughts. It was cool seeing all the decks in this new format, like up close and in person. Um, but we got news before that.
Before we get into the super news, just want to reiterate that this week the Pokemon Illustrator contest promos will be available through the Pokemon Center. At least, just like last year, you can still buy them. And remember the code, I had it in the show notes and the description of last week's episode. You use the code on the Pokemon Center, draw 2024 US or CA or UK, depending on what your region is. Again, that's going to be Friday the 21st. Don't know if that's in the morning, in the evening, or whatever, or how long they'll have it up. Right. Who knows how long the stock is for especially these promos nowadays, right? People beating each other up. Although I will say the we didn't talk about this too much, I think, on the podcast, but the Pokemon Center, Sean, did you see that they implemented a new queue system?
I did not.
So the Pokemon Center has issued a new queue system on their website, and basically they only allow a certain amount of people on their website at a time.
Yeah.
And if you're not in that certain amount, you wait in the line. Um, I was on there not too long ago because Shrouded Fable ETBs went up on or
Yep.
Pokemon Center Shrouded Fable ETBs went up on the Pokemon Center, and I don't have one. I've never had a Shrouded Fable ETB, so I got one. And Journey Together pre-orders also happened
hmm
on the Pokemon Center. Journey Together pre-order ETBs happened, and I just saw one of the restock Twitter accounts or whatever post
Yep.
about it. It's up on the Pokemon Center. And so I just jumped in because I was already on my computer and I was just hanging out anyways, doing some work. And I waited in the queue. It was good. I mean, it was the queue. It was just a cute Pikachu, on the screen, but I was able to get ETBs
Wow.
out of Journey Together. Yeah, after waiting in the queue.
Okay.
Uh, so I want to give props to the Pokemon Center queue, as we're sitting here and I'm talking about how you can get these promos on the Pokemon Center website because I think the queue is pretty good. I don't know the logistics for the back end or anything of a queue on how actual effective it is to stop bots and things like that. But
hmm
I just want to say that a random guy happening to see the restock on Twitter was able to get, two Journey Together ETBs. Seems like it worked.
Hey, I mean, look, yeah, you're right. It wasn't all bot by bots. So there's one confirmed real human that got some.
Yeah,
So
exactly,
that's
and it's
that's
neat.
progress. um, but yeah, that's good. Hopefully things keep getting better on that front.
Yeah. I mean,
Uh,
it's not been too bad, but
no.
anyways, yeah.
But speaking of future sets, I know Jake, you talked about this last week on the pod, but I just wanted to weigh in with a couple of random thoughts about Destined Rivals. For those of you who didn't listen to last week's episode, or are just new, um, that's the set we are getting after Journey Together. It's releasing at the end of May, and obviously there was a lot of speculation about like, okay, when's the Team Rocket set coming out? What's going to be in it? Blah blah blah. We still don't actually know the glory of Team Rocket cards from Japan. But the one thing I've heard on a variety of different platforms that seems to be, it may not every, it's not everybody, but some people seem to be upset that Destined Rivals was confirmed to be a combination of the glory of Team Rocket and the Japanese set Heatwave Arena, which will feature more trainer Pokemon. Like I think there's Misty and Cynthia and others. Um, so yes,
Yeah,
the
Cynthia had some reveals this past
oh
weekend.
yeah, yeah. No, there's going to be some really cool cards in the upcoming sets, but people were commenting that they were upset that the set itself wasn't going to be entirely Team Rocket based. Um, and while I can understand that, right? Like like oh, we're thinking back to the era of like Team Rocket, the original Team Rocket set that came out in like 2000, or Team Rocket Returns, which came out a few years later. Um, and there is some disappointment that we don't get an entirely themed set around Team Rocket. What I do want to remind people is that modern Western Pokemon sets are always made up of multiple Japanese sets, always. Um, and the glory of Team Rocket was only ever one Japanese set. So, and
Yeah.
also, I think it's also important to keep in mind that like Pokemon does not produce that many cards for an individual mechanic. Because you can imagine that the Team Rocket cards will have their own unique cards for their mechanics, similar to Hops cards or Lily cards or whatever. Um, Modern sets are like, I looked it up, like Surging Sparks is like, I think 200 cards, unique cards almost. And
Yeah,
the,
it is very common to have 200 plus unique cards. I think it's
yeah.
been that way for every main set for a while. Maybe there's one or two that's like in the 180s, but
And the original Team Rocket set, if you want a reference point, that was a set that was able to focus entirely on Team Rocket, had, I believe, 89 cards. So,
89.
and then Team Rocket Returns, if you want to say, well, that was like, really early. Team Rocket Returns only a couple of years later was still like, I think only 101. So, this
Mhm.
era that, this idea that like a set can be all focused around one thing in the West does not exist, and it hasn't existed for decades. Unless you're talking about a specialty set, like your Shrouded Fables or your Prismatics or your 151s. That's, but outside of a specialty set, it's always, a combination of themes and mechanics. Just, yeah, as much as I
Mm.
want a booster box that has only Team Rocket on it, that's like a black booster box, that would be dope. Was never going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, if you're saying right now that you're upset about Glory of Team Rocket having multiple sets, where have you been the last couple years of the podcast where we talk about all of the bulk starter deck EXs and everything
Yes.
that gets jammed into these? Like, where have you
Yeah.
been? You're like 4 years late to the party at this point.
Yeah. So just, I don't know if that's the listenership of this pod, but if you're hearing rumbles that people are sad, you know what? I want people that don't understand the TCG to be sad, because maybe they will stop scalping this stuff to the moon and will actually be able to buy it.
Yeah.
So fingers crossed. But anyways, that was my little weigh in. But Jake, we did get some more information about Prize Pack 6. We got a set list. What cards should people be most excited about that we know are now confirmed in this set?
Now, if you have heard the pod or you've been around the Pokemon community, you know that Prize Pack 6 has been catching some noise. If you don't know what a Prize Pack is, basically when you go to local leagues, right? Whether that's challenges, cups, the local weekly tournament or whatever, you get these prize packs and they're all reprinted cards with a promo stamp on them. I have a Raging Bolt right
Yep.
here. It's just a little Raging Bolt EX and it feels the same except it just has the play Pokemon stamp. So every series, every kind of different time they have a new set of cards that are in here. But Sean, one of the things that I think is really, really cool in the in Prize Pack 6 at this time is they are reprinting, they are re-adding cards, such as Charizard EX is in here, right, for a second time in a row, which is nice. Really like that. Um, what was the other one? Earthen Vessel is in here for a second time in a row. Buddy Buddy Poffin is in here for a second time in a row. Night Stretcher,
That's great.
Night Stretcher. Yeah, because Night Stretcher right now, the max rarity is like a ugly reverse hollow. So
Yeah.
now you can have a real cool stretcher in there. There's also a couple different A specs in here, right? Similar to the last prize pack. So glad that they're coming back upon that. I think there's Scoop Up Cyclone is in here, Unfair Stamp is in here, Prime Catcher is in here again. So Prize Pack 6, although has some cool new cards, right? Was Pidgeot EX in the last one? Do you remember?
I feel like Pidgeot, I can't remember specifically. I feel like Pidgeot EX has been in one before, but the new ones are really the Pheasantipity EX is in this set. Um,
Mhm.
and then outside of that, I think is Mew EX new as well.
I think Mew EX is reprinted in Prize Pack Series 6. I think it was maybe in 5, but I think just the combination of like that, Pidgeot, whether it's been reprinted or not, Teal Mask Ogerpon EX, Roaring Moon EX is in this, right? There's just so many good Pokemon that people are really, really excited about. I love the Prize Pack series. I was a hater at first. I admit I really like the first, second, third, fourth placing,
Yeah.
cards that we used to get, but I've been really into prize packs, especially the last 3 or 4 different series that they've done.
I will say I can definitely confirm Scoop Up Cyclone because I pulled one. So there we go.
Yeah, easy.
Yeah. So, anyways, just a little update there. But last little
Mhm.
item of news today is going to be we got news about a couple of promos. Now, these promos are confirmed for a Chinese set, and that is the Espeon and Umbreon EX promos. Um, and like they're really cool. That's great. But the main thing that's newsworthy here is that we talked a couple weeks ago about a Prismatic Evolution figure collection and how that would also be coming with a Umbreon and Espeon, respectively, EX card. And we speculated, like, hey, what's the artwork going to be like? Usually, these premium collections come with a unique artwork in the West nowadays. And I think it's not confirmed, but we feel confident in probably saying, hey, these artworks that you see in these Chinese sets are likely going to be the art that we get in those premium figure collections.
Mhm.
So it's they're very pretty. It's like the Pikachu sort of. It's that new sort of Terra alternate art without the fancy SIR style.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like a regular, full art in
Yep,
a sense,
exactly.
that's been turned into a promo. Like seeing Espeon and Umbreon, 2 very popular Pokemon. Kinda wish that they would have done Glaceon and Leafeon.
Mm.
Right? Because it feels like every time we have a set of promos or whatever, or something about the evolutions, it's this duo. Like, there's another duo in the evolutions.
Yeah, that's true. Um, yeah, I mean, it's I guess Umbreon sells. They know that. They see the Moonbreon
Oh, no.
prices
Yeah.
and they're like, "Money, please."
The
So,
smart thing to do is put, Umbreon on the front of it. That's the smart thing to do. But it's God, give some love to my man Leafeon over
yeah.
here.
I will say this one other random thing. I have no idea how real or fake this is, Jake, but oh, hold up. You disappeared. There we go. You're back. Um, one other random thing that I saw, I think I saw like a Pokemon a promotional image somewhere, and it featured all the evolutions. And then there was like it was like an evolution that had big question marks around it. And I have no
Oh, you're talking
idea.
about the color wheel or whatever.
Maybe I can't remember what the image was, but I'm just making sure it wasn't a dream. But like there was an evolution that was previewed, or like a box that had a question mark in it, implying that there was a new evolution coming um, in the future. Have you heard any rumblings about this, or is this just me?
I mean, this happens every single time.
Yeah,
There's like a
fair.
new Pokemon game or a new generation on the horizon. But I did see it was like a promotional image that Pokemon put out. They featured like some sort of color wheel or a set of colors, and every single color aligned with an evolution, and there was one extra color
Right.
on there. That's what I think is you're referring to. That's what sparked kind of the conversation, and I'm taking it with a grain of salt,
Yeah.
because remember when we were like, Pokemon always releases new evolutions on the odd number of generations, so therefore Scarlet and Violet's gonna have like this happens this song and dances all the time. Like
I suppose.
they'll put it out if they want to put it out, yeah.
I don't know.
But it is cool though that
When did Umbreon come out? It's been a while now, right? That was the last one.
well, Umbreon came out in generation
Oh,
Umbreon?
no, wait. Was it Glaceon and Leafeon were the most recent ones?
Sylveon.
Sylveon.
Sylveon came out in uh shoot, was it Sun and Moon or X and Y?
I
I think
think.
it I think it was X and Y. Yeah, it was X and Y.
Okay, so we've had Sun and Moon and Scarlet and Violet. We've had 2 generations now with no Pokemon, with no evolutions, I should
Mhm.
say. I don't think it's that wild to say the Pokemon Company loves their evolutions, and I think at this point they're slow rolling because they're like, "Hey, there's only so many typings we can keep doing, so we can't go crazy." But I think 2 generations of games, 3 generations effectively, if they're talking about the next one, um, and like what would that be, like 10 years almost?
Well, so I amend, it's Sun and Moon. Sylveon was
Okay,
made in Sun and Moon.
but
I'm an
still.
idiot. But Pokemon Sun and Moon, I think released around like 2013, 2016. Dang, that was my
Okay.
initial thought.
So 30th anniversary next year. I don't know. There could be a new evolution 10 years on. That's all I'm saying.
I mean, I think what I'm gonna say is I think it's dumb to not ever put out another evolution
Yeah.
because they're so like you're saying, they're so widely popular, right? The merch sales will go crazy, stuff like that. And there's so many different types. Sean, you learned playing Pokidoo on the
So,
stream.
I
You
didn't play.
learned that there are way more types in the video game than there are in the card game.
I was so bad at that one. I was terrible.
So, like, I mean, there's all the opportunity to make like a rock type evolution, a bug type
Yeah.
evolution,
Bug
right? It's
type
just a
evolution.
matter
Do it. Do it, you
steel
cowards.
type evolution, like it's just a matter of time before we get another one, right? I just don't believe in the tinfoil hat of like, oh, the color wheel has this many spots and by the color code GH or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily believe it, but I will say there's probably gonna be an evolution sometime in the future.
Yeah.
Be silly not to.
Well, Jake, that's enough speculating. Let's talk about we got EUIC coming up this weekend. Big event, big tournament, one of the 3 internationals we have every year. We've had a couple of regionals. Well, I should say we've had Merida regional. We've had some
Mhm.
SPEs. We did the League Cup yesterday. This is what I was alluding to earlier that we're going to talk about it. But um, in this Prismatic Evolution set, and so let's just briefly talk about the League Cup, and then we can get into like a very rough tier list that I'll pull up that we can
Mm.
sort of slot the main decks into. And apologies if we randomly missed something, but it should cover all the bases mostly.
It is what it is.
But yeah, I mean, after the cup yesterday, I will say that what won our cup yesterday was Archaladon. Um, and it was Archaladon without Dialga V-Star that won the cup.
I was gonna say, I've seen
Yeah.
that once or twice now in the last couple days.
Yeah, I mean, look, you have the Archaladon, you have Relicanth, so that you can use the pre-evolution attack, which can easily take care of any of the V-Stars most of the time. Um, and in terms of consistency, having watched that deck, it was also very strong even after a Badoo. Like, the player who was playing it got hit with Badoo a few times, but between the ability to just attach via evolution and playing a lot of research in Iono, there's a lot more consistency than maybe you needed through like just ball search or item cards. So that was interesting to see. Um, but the other decks that I would say had a pretty good showing that we haven't seen a lot of at Merida or other regionals are Regidrago V Star. That was the finals match, actually.
Yeah, you wanna talk about a deck that fell off.
Yes, that
Regidrago.
everybody was like, ban this deck, ban this card. Not really, but people were like really upset because the deck was really strong. And all of a sudden, people they print Badoo, and everyone's like, I'm not playing with this deck anymore. And I'm like, why? What?
It's the meme, you just mentioned it, I don't wanna play with you
Yeah,
anymore.
yeah.
People were doing that with it's funny because before Prismatic Evolutions, I've seen this meme where people did it with the Dragapult deck,
Hmm.
right? Because of Regidrago coming out, because it's a 1 or a 2 of in Regidrago. But now we've Pheasantipede flipped the script, and now everybody's doing that with Drago because Dragapult is pretty cool. Spoiler alert for the tier
Yeah.
list, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean it's so that was wild. And the other deck that I want to point out was Lugia V Star had a decent showing yesterday at the Cup. Um, had I believe one or two in the top eight. It might have been the most represented deck in the top eight at the Cup. Granted, it's a League Cup, grains of salt, but I think especially as Dragapult and Charizard get better and better, playing Lugia with Regigigas, which if you don't know, it allows it to hit Terra types for 330. So um, it was just interesting. Lugia is another deck that people just sort of, I think, completely dropped a month or two ago for unknown reasons, despite getting more support. Um, so it was interesting seeing those three decks especially do well at the Cup. It was not what you would have predicted from recent events. But Jake, we can get into the tier list now. So you sort of alluded to this, but let's start with Dragapult, right? Just regular old Dragapult. Where do you feel like Dragapult sits for you?
Question for everyone who can't see the tier list, including myself.
Yeah.
How many tiers do we
Oh,
have?
I mean, the version I'm borrowing this from Tier List Maker, but the version I have is BDIF, A, B, C, and D. But A is amazing, B is bulk of the meta, C is rogue, and D is just don't play.
I would probably put Dragapult in A tier.
Okay.
I think Dragapult's pretty good. I don't think it's indestructible, right? It is a very interesting deck having a stage 2. I mean, it's like Gardevoir, where it's a stage 2 that doesn't need rare candy. Which I
Hmm.
think is quite unique in a sense. Although I guess maybe not so much unique if I mention that Gardevoir already does it. So, I like Dragapult, but I still think Dragapult can lose to decks like Gardevoir, which it theoretically should farm.
Yeah.
Um, so I think just your energy acceleration at times and riding on the back so hard of Crystal, it seems like,
Hmm.
um, puts you like a little bit of a step lower, but being able to Budew and Dusknoir is like, it's a pretty strong combo, especially when you're placing damage counters everywhere. I mean, it did get, ninth through 13th at, or ninth through 12th at Merida, as well as a fifth place spot.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, a lot of people are seeing success with the deck. I think that the math maths really well for Dragapult. Doing 200 is really good. You place damage counters. Um, Radiant Alakazam, I think, helps a lot. People are playing it. I think like playing around with like Halucha in the deck as well to fix math on the 70 HP Mons. And also, Dragapult, I think, is the perfect deck to take advantage of Badu in terms of like, you're going to have a slow start. You can Badu your opponent. And also, I think Dragapult in combination with Dusknoir, just being able to just take so many prizes all at once is it's quite annoying as an opponent, right? Like you're
Mhm.
just sitting there going like, stop. This feels unfair because there really is zero counter to Dragapult right now because the only counter is Rabsca. And if they're playing the Dusknoir engine, then that just kills the Rabsca and you'll never get another one set up. So it's not basically Rabsca's unplayable against it at this point. So the one thing I will
Yeah.
say, having watched it at the Cup last night, and I can't tell if this is a function of the players who played it or the deck list or what. Dragapult, the biggest enemy for Dragapult is itself. It is,
Oh, 100%.
I will say this, it's like Gardevoir in that you don't necessarily rely on rare candy, but I think that Gardevoir is a much better comeback deck than Dragapult is. And I think that the slower you go as a Dragapult player, the worse it is for you. Whereas like Gardevoir, I don't know. I just watching those games, I'm like, I think somebody needs to really look at Dragapult with 4 rare candies because the strength in Dragapult lies in attacking with Dragapult as quickly as possible and putting pressure on with damage counters. And the way that people are playing it now with largely like the Drag Cloak engine and playing it slow, every game I saw where Dragapult played slow, they lost. Every single one.
Yeah.
Um, so I get it. Badu is going to slow you down in terms of, you won't be able to play those rare candies. So I'm not saying don't play Drag Cloak, but I don't know. I'm lower on Dragapult in terms of its actual like top table success because I think the way that it's currently run is too slow for its own good. But I think
Mhm.
A is fine because I if anybody brings it to EUIC, they will only bring it if they've really cracked the list. So that's my opinion. But Jake, is there a list that now that we talked about Dragon Ball, what's a list that's on your radar outside of Dragapult?
I think Miraidon is kind of an obvious pick as well, Miraidon being probably in there up I'm really confused of whether I wanna put it into A or BDIF. Taking up 4 of the top 8 spots, and people were basically running, like, the same 60 as well. Like, none of those people, when Azul won it the other week, I think work together with
Mm.
the deck, right? The closest that you can get is Caleb Gettimer being 13th, but they always team up and work together. But pretty much everybody had the general same 60s. So part of me is like, I want to put Miraidon up in the BDIF category, right? Because it was successful and I think it's a huge reason why Lugia, is kind of like underplayed right now is just because it wallops Lugia in a sense, and being able to have Regigigas to, bop a Charizard, bop a Dragapult, bop a Gardevoir, any of those big HP Pokemon, I think is a huge deal. Um, Along with the consistency of it, and also just really only needing a couple things to get going. But was this just the perfect event to play Miraidon? Can it be sustainable? That's the part where I'm like, "Ah, man, I don't know."
I think it's a tough one. I think that it's a factor of it being early in the meta and everybody leaning into heavy evolution lines and slow play,
Mhm.
meaning like leaning into like the Badus and the whatever. But if Miraidon gets to go second, and if you're able to get into those Iron Hands early, all of these evolution decks are just going to be like, you're just going to farm them, right? And so I think seeing Raging Bolt fall off a little bit, um, and seeing the rise of things like Dragapult over Reggie Drago. So
Mhm.
I think it's an A. I don't want to put it at BDIF because I do think that it was a really good meta call, but people are going to readjust for EUIC. That's my gut.
Mhm.
Um, but it is a great deck. It's super fast. Like the speed of
Yeah.
the deck is crazy.
And I
Uh,
think Miraidon's also one of those decks that it just beats itself, right?
yeah,
If your electric generator whiffs, it whiffs. You're playing like
yeah,
a 15,000 energy deck. There's no reason for it to whiff, but sometimes that's just card games.
yeah, yeah. So, I mean, I think also there's a rise of another deck that I think puts Miraidon at more of a disadvantage, and I want to bring that up now. The image we have is Archaladon Dialga, but like, and maybe that's the right call. I'm not making a call with the image of like which version is best, but I also want to put the Archaladon in the A tier
Mhm.
because I do think that it is a very strong deck. It plays well into, I think it plays well into Miraidon. Hitting 220 or more if needed, if you've taken some damage. Miraidon is really going to struggle to knock the Archaladon out. So that's pretty strong. If you can get the Dialga V-Star turn off and maybe take out a Raikou and a Miraidon 2 turns in a row, you're going to be so far ahead in the prize trade, it's not even going to matter. So I think Archaladon is a pretty good play as well for EUIC, and that's why I'm putting it in the A tier. But Jake, for you, are you Team Dialga V Star or Team none?
Well, listen, buddy. I played Dialga V-Star well before Archaludon came out, so you cannot say on team or none. Look, but, I honestly would put Archaludon and Dialga in B. I think one of the reasons that Archaludon and Dialga has been more successful lately at these types of things, or people are done with playing Charizard, right? There's a whole bunch of these Radiant Charizard decks that aren't really in the meta, right? We even talked about how uh Dragapult, which is a deck that could play Radiant Charizard, right? Because it plays fire energies. Dragapult has moved on to Radiant Alakazam, right? So you whiff that one hit KO potential. I think also Duraludon, Archaladon, and Dialga, like you were mentioning, has great numbers on stuff like Miraidon, some of the lower stuff in the format. Um, and I think it's in good position, but I think it really just depends on what the meta actually is. If Dragapult is super high, if Dragapult is super popular, then I could see it because Dragapult feel like kind of struggles with it at times again in that matchup specifically. But um, I think it's a little bit more dependent on what's in the room compared to a lot of other things in the A tier. I don't know if I'd put
Yeah.
Miraidon and Dragapult in the same tier as Archaludon.
I I part of me wants to keep it there, and I'll explain my reason. I'm going to make one last case for it, and it is I'm looking at all the decks in this list right now, and really there's only one. There's two decks I think that are actually viable, but I don't know how heavily they'll be played. But there's only two decks that can one shot Archaladon, and that is Raging Bolt, which is a very good deck. You know,
Ah,
still very fast, still very strong, but I think Badu hurts it. But you have Raging Bolt and you have Gouging Fire. But outside of those two decks, I don't think any of these other decks can one shot the Archaladon. And the Archaladon having the ability to use Professor Turo and to use Scoop Up Cyclone means that you effectively are negating entire turns from your opponent. And that's crazy. Having seen
yeah.
it firsthand, I'm like, even the setup damage that Dragapult might want to do, of like hitting 200 and putting some damage here to fix your math later, one scoop up Cyclone and it's all meaningless, right? So
Mhm.
I don't know. I'm more in the camp of Archaladon after having seen it, but so I will move it to B because I do think that it is. I don't think it will be heavily played because I think that its play style is not super appealing. It is a much slower play style. It feels like Guardian, right? Back in the day, where like you're just kind of doing the same attack or two every turn, and your goal is to not get knocked out. You know what I mean, right? Like it's a little
I
different.
can see it. I can see a little bit of what you mean. I feel like
Yeah,
it's somewhat similar to like Charizard Pidgeot.
it could be. Yeah. Whereas like
Just
your
like your energy is coming a different place.
yeah, exactly. Like in your output, your damage output is not usually that crazy. Um,
Mhm.
so But yeah, speaking of one of the decks I just mentioned, we might as well just go into it. Raging Bolt, a deck that I think super popular for very long, plays really fast, kind of like Miraidon, but I think it has seen a huge decrease in players. Where do you put this Raging Bolt deck?
See,
See, you think it's a rogue deck now?
I think it's a rogue deck. I mean, just look at the tournament results. I mean, unless
Yeah,
you're at the local level, there's nothing. There's nothing around for this. So, I think it's very easily exposed. I think Budu insanely hurts it, right? If Budu decks are
yeah,
really strong, like Dragapult, like Gardevoir, I think that really hurts Raging Bolt, not being able to use your items to find your Pokemon, get the acceleration going, recycle your item or
yeah,
recycle your energies, stuff like that. I just don't like Raging Bolt anymore. I mean, I never really liked Raging Bolt, but now I really don't like Raging Bolt.
yeah. Fair, fair. Okay, I'll stick it and see. I think for all those reasons, I think you're absolutely right. It struggles. Um,
Yeah, and it consistently underperforms at every single major that we talk about, it feels like.
All right. Well, I got another one for you. The other one that I mentioned, gouging fire, the new kid on the block, so to speak. Um, the nice thing about this, it's a fire type deck, which is the only real fire type deck that's seeing decent play, and I think it's had some surprising results. For those of you who don't know, gouging fire has an attack that does 260 damage for 3 energy. And if you have any modifiers or who knows, you also have the Delphox, which can do 100 to the bench. So it has a few interesting options out there, but
Mhm.
I don't know. Part of me, I don't think it's an A tier pick. I think it is a very, I think it's a good deck, but I think it's a deck that's a little bit meta dependent. Um, so I would put it with the Archaludon in my estimation. I don't think it's C tier though. I think it's better than that.
I think it's C tier.
You think it's C tier?
I think it's a cool deck. I loved watching the Gouging Fire. I loved seeing it, and I've loved, the content creators putting out videos about it. Seeing the lists on Twitter, seeing the guy, gosh, I forget his name off the top of my head, Mauricio Patino, just super hype up this deck because he was a huge believer, and Azul was calling him crap in on Twitter, and they met in the finals, and it was so poetic and so cool. But I'm not a huge believer in this deck. I don't think like this is, in my opinion, one of those decks, especially at this championship, where it was a really cool choice and nobody knew about it. And
Hmm.
nobody knew what was gonna happen alongside of it, especially because there wasn't really, streamed games until, like, the Beach Court podcast,
Yep.
started live streaming it, which at that point, I mean, you're so far in the tournament that doesn't really influence too much, but, I think this was a great closed deckless deck. I don't really know how much longer it can hold on. It might, obviously get some more people in EUIC of like a really, really cool list. And I know like Joe from Omnipoke, now that Omnipoke is streaming again, he was messing around with the gouging fire list and was having a decent time with it. But like I don't know, like I don't consider it the same as Archaludon Dialga in my opinion. Like, I think
Yeah.
Archalida Dialga is stronger than that, but it's weird because, like, I also think is it stronger than Raging Bolt? Like, that part I don't even know. Like, because Raging Bolt is still a good deck, even though I crapped on it, for
Yeah,
5
sure. I
minutes,
mean,
but
look, all of these are good decks in the right player's hands and in the right matchups. Let's just I'm not going to cover every deck on this list cuz there's too much, but
yeah.
um
I mean, Gouging Fire does hit really good numbers, right? Being able to hit 260 damage. That knocks out all of these different V-type Pokemon that are in the format, right? With like the Lugia, right? You have some
yeah.
damage modifiers. You can KO Lugia, you can KO Miraidon, you can KO like a Dialga, Regidrago V-Star, Goldango even.
Yeah.
I think you can knock that out. So like it does hit pretty good numbers, but I don't know. It's just missing that one piece of consistency at times. I just remembered what won the SPE.
What?
Lost Box.
Lost Box. Really? In this
Yes.
format? In this
Yes.
economy?
I don't know how that occurred to me, but I just
Okay.
remembered that. So I wanted to say that
Okay,
because
well
we were
let's go there. Lost
yeah.
Box. Um I, I I'm not gonna lie. I'm gonna stick Lost Box in C tier. I don't care that it won the SPE. I don't care. You hit one too many Dragapults. You hit one too many Regidrago V stars, and you are cooked. You are absolutely cooked as a Lost Box player.
No, no, yeah, I'm fine with that. I'm kind of in that same boat. But I mean, it was cool in my opinion to see Lost Box back in because I do love the Lost Box engine, right? I
Oh yeah,
love little minute decisions like that and super impactful ones. But
yeah,
uh yeah, I think just even though with Budu, all you have to do is just get to 4 in the Lost Zone and then you just Cramorant. I think
sure.
Budu just makes it really difficult in a lot of situations.
It's a little annoying. I mean, you don't have as many of the switching options that you might want, and that's a
Yeah,
big
like
deal.
you can't have the super explosive turn as usual.
No, no, that does slow you down. Um, but yeah, I look, I think the deck can absolutely go on a run because if you hit the right matchups, the deck's crazy. But I struggle with it being better than C tier at the moment.
Yeah,
Um, okay, let's go to
that's fine.
Lugia. I think Lugia is an interesting deck because I was talking it up. I was bigging it up earlier, but I think Lugia sits with Archaludon. I think it's a B tier deck. I think it actually is a good deck right now. Somebody might be able to build a version of it with variety of different attackers that will do a little bit better, right? You could play the Chinchino build if you just want to say I don't care about Dragapult. You could play the Regigigas build. You could play it with Blood Moon Ursaluna and Iron Hands. Like, there's so many options for the deck to run that I could see somebody making a go of it. But to the point we made earlier, Miraidon, Miraidon punishes the deck quite hard.
I think it dep I think, like you're saying, like, it depends on matchups and meta, and we've kind of seen this through Lugia, and I think every tournament we talk about this, or at least mention it, the more that Miraidon goes up, the less that Lugia,
Yeah,
moves. But then when Miraidon goes away, Lugia goes back up. Like it's just this back and forth at times, and now might be a little bit more towards the decline in a sense. I mean, all you have to do, like I was playing against, I went to Pokemon League, by the way, Sean. So
mhm,
oof,
nice.
Boomer goes to Pokemon League, and I played against a Lugia as Gardevoir, and all I really needed was to just Screamtail the 2 Archeops, and
Mm.
then I win,
Yeah,
so if you just especially as Dragapult, right, you get, like, a boss turn, you take out the Archeops and set up another one for the next turn or something, or whatever, like, I don't know, there's just too many decks I feel like where, like, if you just take out the Archeops, you win, right? And
yeah,
there's not too many decks, in my opinion, that have such a polarizing, like, defeat strategy in a
yeah.
sense.
Like Chen Pao,
Um,
you take out the back Excaliburs, you win.
yeah.
But
I
you're
don't
you're
I don't
absolutely
yeah, I don't think there's too much of something like that going on right now. So I'm okay with putting Lugia in the B tier. I might move it to A. I still think it's a really, really good deck, and, you know, although I did what other deck did I bank on, like, just meta right now? I feel like there was another deck that I was like, "It's gotta be in this tier because of the meta," and I was just gonna say, like, Lugia would be in at least B because of the meta of Miraidon.
Yeah, I think
I
Miraidon
don't know,
keeps it down. I think people will play Miraidon because it's really fast,
and it's
um,
fun.
and it's fun, right? And I think that you'll hit have a higher likelihood of hitting a bad matchup. So that's, I think, the main reason that I'm putting it below Miraidon right now.
Yeah.
Um, the next one I want, and this is going to be a controversial one, maybe, maybe not. I think Reggie Drago is A tier, and I know this sounds crazy, but hear me out. Nobody is playing Manaphy. Almost nobody is playing Manaphy anymore because Dragapult is good and Manaphy is useless. So I think because of that, if nobody's playing Manaphy, Kieran plays. I saw it yesterday 4 or 5 times where Kieran won people games, and you can do setup damage to take 5 prizes in a turn with Kieran. It's just nutty. Um, and I think the main question Reggie Drago faces is it's always what attackers do you put? You can have Dragapult, you can have Kieran. Do you put the Gudra V-Star? Do you put the Giratina? And honestly, do you put the Alolan Executor?
Mhm.
I think that there is rationale to putting Alolan Executor back in the deck, especially if you expect to see something like Archaludon or Dragapult, where you just need to take those prizes immediately and you're willing to risk a coin flip. So, but Jake, what do you think? That's my hot take. Is I'm putting it in the A tier. I don't think it will be played at an A tier level because I think people might move or gravitate to other decks. But I think the deck is really underplayed right now.
I want it in B. I understand your reasoning for A. I think it's cool in A. I feel like I wanna put it in B, though. I just feel like Dragapult Dusknoir is just way better. Like, right,
Oof.
like, if like,
Yeah,
being able to have an ability that you can activate every single turn on your support Pokemon, right, in the Drakloaks comparatively to the Teal Mask Ogerpon where you need the energies,
energy.
like,
Yeah,
the Drakloak is a one-card combo, but uh, the Teal Mask Ogerpon is a two-card combo, right? Teal Mask and the Grass Energy. So I think and plus you get to play Dusknoir. Dusknoir's so good. You get to
yeah,
play Briar. Briar is so good, especially in so many of these decks and archetypes that you talk about. You know, you talk about Regidrago being able to take a 3 prize turn, right, with the what's
Kieran.
that guy called? Kyurem, yeah, the
Yeah,
Kyurem play, but Dragapult Dusknoir can also take a 3 prize turn just by playing Briar, and their 3 prize turn wins them the game, and they don't have to discard all the energy, like,
yeah.
I mean, Regidrago's really fallen off, and it's been super interesting because all it took was 1 card, right? Budu, and
Badu.
maybe a
Yeah,
little bit of change in the, format, but, yeah, I'm just not really a believer in Dragapult right now,
Reggie. Yeah,
and
Reggie
I'd
Drago.
probably yeah, Regidrago. I'm a believer in Dragapult. Regidrago, I'm not really a believer, and I think I would try to put it in the same spot as, like, Archalanon right there.
Okay. Okay. I'll stick it in B. Uh, this next one though, we got time for a couple more decks. I'm not gonna go over all of them, but I'll go over maybe like 2 or 3 more. The first one, real quick, Gardevoir.
I think it's A.
Yeah, it's an A tier deck. I think it's an A tier deck that is highly. It's got a high skill ceiling. Um, it's it's going to be very dependent on who plays the deck. I think you'll see a lot of Gardevoir players that aren't as experienced absolutely fall flat on their face. But then those top tier players like the Henry Chows of the world will do really well with it at EUIC. So I think that's an easy A tier. Um, yeah, pretty solid.
Yeah,
Pretty
I
solid.
mean, I can confirm, playing the playing Gardevoir at the locals. We had a 5-round locals. The games I won, it was crazy. I was like, "Wow, this deck is absolutely broken." The games I lost, I was like, "I made a huge mistake."
Yeah.
Um, and it was really just all on me. It was not necessarily I mean, my opponents did well, they won, but, um, it was like, I can recall one of the losses was because I overextended, right, trying out the new, no Drifloon build, which is super interesting and way different. Um, and then, like, another loss was because my Screamtail targeted the wrong Pokemon. I went for a Drakloak, I should have gone for a Dusclops.
Mm.
I don't know if it would have won me the game, but it definitely would have helped. Uh, and so, like, yeah, Gardevoir is insane. I think Gardevoir is so good.
So, next one on the list. I think this one's been getting a lot of hype. It hasn't necessarily gotten all the results, but Cloth. Jake, I just want your take. Where are you putting Cloth on this list?
I think it's ridiculous that we're calling it Cloth, first of all. Like, it's
What?
a ridiculous it's a Terapagos deck.
It is. It
It
has
only plays
Terapagos.
it only plays 1 Cloth.
No, no, the list that I saw yesterday played two. The multiple list played two Cloth and two
Okay,
Terapagos.
maybe the list that you saw yesterday, but I feel like 80% of lists that I see just play 1 Cloth, 2 Terapagos, right? This is just as much as a Hisuian Electrode V deck or a Radiant Hisuian Sneasler deck or
Mm.
a Budu deck as it is Cloth deck. And
I mean,
okay, that's
sure.
my
You're
rant.
you're not wrong. That's true. But I think the preference in most games is to lead with single prizers where possible. And so that's why I choose
Yeah.
Cloth. But where do
Oh,
you
I
put
mean,
this deck?
Cloth has its strengths for sure, but if it's over B, I'm causing a riot. Um, because I think, gosh, it's like it's very similar to Goldengo. It's a really cool deck. It's a it's a good deck, but it's a bad deck.
I'm
I don't
sticking
know. I'm
Goldango in C just as we talk. I think it's a C
okay.
deck. I like the
Yeah,
deck, don't get
I'm
me
fine
wrong,
with that.
but I think yeah. But yes, back to Cloth.
I think Cloth is somewhere between. I probably put it B. Right, it has its merits. It has its results. Good players have done well with it. I think it's silly to call it a cloth deck because it's a Terapagos deck that just happens to play cloth. So get it
Yeah.
right, people. But yeah, I mean, I think this new like set because we started out on Terapagos with the Noctowls, right
Yeah.
in there. I think the new era of Terapagos in this poison package, right, kind of being mushed into the cloth deck and pushing cloth out is super interesting and I think is super good. Bench spaces are huge and full, right? You can do all those things. Also, this deck plays Black Belts training. That's a
Yeah.
cool deck. That's a cool deck.
Yeah. I mean, you can play Black Belt, you could play Kieran potentially, but yeah, I really like this deck. I think it's a clever way around Pheasantipity as well.
Mhm.
People, I would never don't discount that. Many games are won and lost on the back of can my opponent draw out of my Iono or whatever I'm trying to do to stave them off for a turn. And if you're knocking something out and hoping, uh, oftentimes they're going to just fez their way out of it and then win the game. But Cloth is one of the few decks that can actually take the prizes, put your opponent down in hand size, and keep them there.
Can
Uh,
this deck succeed through Budu in terms of like being Budued?
I think it can. I mean, I'm trying to think through like it definitely has weaknesses. Like you need to find your Pokemon, which is very item heavy. But once you have your Pokemon on the field, um, like you can still play Arvin and go get the tool card to start poisoning. So killing a Budu is pretty easy with your own Budu. So if you're able to get Brute Bonnet, the tool, and have your own Budu in the active, I think this deck is actually the strongest deck to play Budu because you can item lock, poison, and take knockouts all with Budu
Mhm.
and not turn on Fezandipity. So your opponent has no Fezandipity, no items, yeah, and theoretically a bad hand. No other deck has that level of ability.
Yeah, I mean, I've talked to a couple of people that have played against like the Terapagos cloth deck, and they're like, the game really changes when my Budu's only hitting for 10, but their Budu is hitting for 30, right? With
Or fit
the
or
poison,
70.
or yeah, with the binding mochi, is attached to it. Like Budu's just like item lock 70, item lock 70.
It's
Um,
gross.
it's kind of really funny, and that's why I would definitely put this above like Gold Dango, and that's why I'm cool keeping it in the B tier.
Jake, we have there's other decks. There's a lot of other decks. There's Charizard and there's Iron Thorns and blah blah blah. But one more deck. What deck do you want to put on this list that I haven't mentioned?
Uh, some sort of controller stall.
I mean, Snorlax is a D. Don't play. I'm just gonna say it. So
That's a hot take.
I know it's a hot take, but
I
it just
can't believe you
is.
put Snorlax stall under Raging Bolt and Gouging Fire. That
It's
might
not
be a
that
heinous crime.
it's not that I think it's a worse deck than those two. I think it is a bad deck in this meta. Imagine getting item locked as a Snorlax player. Rip. Rip a Reno. That's
Okay, but now
bad.
your Butoof can't retreat.
I don't care if my Budu can't retreat. What's your Snorlax gonna do? Nothing.
Keep it trapped in the active. What are you talking
I
about?
don't. My Budu has 0 attack cost. I don't care.
Okay, I'll just pick up a Snorlax when you finally attack for the 15th time and you try to do
Sure.
150 damage. I don't think Budu is as
I
bad
maybe not.
against Snorlax, because if you're Buduing, you're like, what else are you going on with? Because your Budu is just stuck.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't
I don't
think
know.
Budu is I don't think Budu's the correct way. Now, I do think if we're talking about popularity, we're talking about the amount of people that
Sure,
play it.
nobody's gonna play
Okay.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll put it in D, right? Because it is just like every other control deck, it is not super popular, and only the best of the best control players, and the people that know it the most, it's not a deck that you just pick up the night before and you start playing. I think D is a heinous crime.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
I'm willing to commit this crime, Jake. Um, I guess to wrap things up, what do you think wins the tournament? It can be something I didn't mention. It's fine, but I feel like I covered most of the big hitters. What do you think
What do I feel like
wins
wins the tournament?
EUIC? I know it's a big one. We can be wrong. We're almost always wrong. So
I wanna say Dragapult. I think
okay.
Dragapult had a pretty good showing at Merida, even though it didn't win, right? Like I mentioned, taking up a lot of the lower half of the top 16, right? Has some good showings and can have some good plays, right? You talk about with the damage spread and things like that. I think Dragapult ends up winning this one, but I don't know how populous it is, especially in Top Cut.
I I have a similar wavelength to you. I think it is a dragon type Pokemon, but I think Reggie Drago wins this tournament.
All right, you're full of
And
hot takes today.
I know, I know. I'm just gonna go out there. I'm gonna say it. And the only reason I'm saying that it's like I just nobody is playing Manaphy. The deck is crazy. And I think, I don't know what I would change about it. Maybe I'd play a Alolan Executor because I'm a masochist and like coin flips. I like losing to coin flips, Jake. I don't know what to tell you, but
You blame it on the coin. Blame it on the coin. It's
I
not my fault.
I
Blame it
want to
on the
play
coin.
TCG Pocket in real life. Anyways, yeah, that's my hot take. That's my prediction. Both of us are almost certainly wrong, but we'll put it out there. So
I will say, very excited for Journey Together format, right? Watching the Champions League tournament over the weekend. That was definitely, I would say, a little bit more of my focus
yeah,
in my attention, because I'm like, wow, I can't wait to play Enzorark and Trash One Draw 2,
can't wait to play
again
for
for the.
Ralligator.
Yeah, for Alligator, also a really, really cool deck. There was a Slow King deck. Did you see the
Yeah.
Temporal Forces
I didn't
Slow King
see
deck?
it, but I heard. I heard lots of people talking about the Slow King deck.
Just just watch like the Champions League VOD or Azul's VOD watching the deck. It was the first 3 rounds of day 1. So you get a good look at it. It's a sick deck.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very
So,
cool.
Jake, that's our hot take. Sign us off, and we'll see how wrong we are next week.
That's going to be the Metapod podcast. Thank you so much for listening. My name is Jake. That is Sean. We will get you next week. I think we'll have, yeah, EUIC is this weekend.
Yep.
So
And I
don't
will
forget
say,
about, oh,
we might be on a different day moving forward because of my work. I have new work thing.
oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Sean got a new job. So
Yeah.
um, we'll tell you all about that,
Yeah.
well before that actually happens. So anyways, thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next episode.